So today we have I think a really special treat. We have a guy who I consider one of the best in PR anywhere. So 22 years as on the PR team with the Golden State Warriors, 29 years in the NBA. Raymond Ridder, Senior VP of Communications with the Golden State Warriors. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Mike. Always good to catch up with old friends.
The resounding feeling I get from all the media members when I work there, and even still the people that I still talk to, is that Raymond is one of the best PR guys in sports. Forget the NBA. One of the best PR guys in sports. He gets it, and he works really, really hard. Did you dream of being a PR guy? Did you dream of working in sports? Did you make PR work for yourself? How did your getting into communications in the NBA, how'd that happen?
So I just was a huge sports fan as a kid growing up. Spent most of my time in Southern California, although spent some time in the Midwest and Wichita, Kansas as well. But just growing up a huge sports fan, following the Dodgers and the Lakers and the Kings and the Rams and all those teams in Southern California, and just always knew I wanted to get involved in sports. Every waking moment where I wasn't in school was watching a baseball game, a football game, a basketball game. Became especially close in terms of being a Laker fan. Just, the Magic Johnson being drafted in 1979 and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and that whole team and the great run they had throughout the 80s. So the Lakers were must-see TV when I was growing up, and just were kind of addicted to them and their franchise and their team. And so just always had that passion for sports. And so when I started college, I knew I wanted to get involved in sports somehow. Got a degree in marketing, and kind of got my break when I was driving home from school one night. Had some night classes at Cal State San Bernardino, and a guy named Josh Rosenfeld, who was the Lakers PR director at the time, was doing an interview with legendary broadcaster Chick Hearn, and Chick asked him how young students or kids got involved with pro teams. And he said, well, we offer internships every year and bring in some college kids. And literally I got home that night and wrote a resume and a letter and sent it off to the Lakers. And that journey took me about 2.5 years, to be honest with you, of just beating down the Lakers door and trying to prove to them I'd be a good intern candidate for them. And finally, after about 2.5 years, my dream came to fruition, and I ended up becoming an intern in the Lakers PR department.
It's interesting because I was talking to somebody about that actually earlier today, and that the fact that you spent 2.5 years trying to land an internship with the Lakers, any normal human being would send a resume, maybe give a follow-up, maybe two. You sent plants, you sent gifts, you showed up in suits for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
What makes you do that? Like, you just wanted to be with the Lakers that bad?
Well, I think I wanted to be with the Lakers, but in sports in general. And sports is such as a small field. Like, there are 30 teams in the NBA, and most NBA teams have 3 PR people, maybe. So that's what's 90 total PR people in the NBA. There are a lot of PR folks in business in the world. You're one of them, do a great job at what you do, but sports is such a defined position in terms of the number of jobs or whatnot. So I just always knew that I wanted to get involved in sports, and was willing to put, there was such a limited field. I was willing to put my life on hold. I tell people all the time, my senior year of college at Cal State San Bernardino, I was going to school full time. I did my internship with the Lakers, and I had a part-time job for the Southern California Gas Company. My Fridays for a year were class at Cal State San Bernardino from 8 until noon. The Lakers played on most Fridays. Drive into LA. It was 81 miles from my parents' house to the Forum. Drive in, get to LA at 2 o'clock, stay till the Forum till the game ended at 11 o'clock at night. Drive back to San Bernardino and do the middle of the night messenger run for the Southern California Gas Company, driving around to different gas companies in Big Bear and Palm Springs and Riverside and Beaumont and Banning. I knew what I wanted to do, and I had to make sacrifices. I really put my personal life on hold for for again, 2.5 years, because I knew what I wanted to do. And I knew the field was so limited that I had to kind of think outside the box and do things differently.
My guess is you didn't get paid by the Lakers either at that point.
The only money I made at that point, I was getting college credit. So as a senior at Cal State San Bernardino, and whenever I'd write a story, one of the great opportunities I had was I got to write for the program. So if you came to a Lakers game, Hoop Magazine was the official game program, and I got to for 41 home games, I probably wrote the story in the magazine 15 times. And from my perspective, that was so cool. I grew up this huge Laker fan. You come to a game, my parents or my friends, and you spend $10 for the game program, and you open it up and it says, tonight's game by Raymond Ridder, the Lakers versus the Celtics. It's like, that was really cool. And it gave me great on the job training of learning how to write. And I always thought I was a good writer in school and whatnot, but to actually have something published in a game magazine was really cool.
So you spent a year as an intern there?
No, it's about 2.5 years. I did it my senior year of college at Cal State San Bernardino. Then for at least about another year after that. It's probably about a little over 2 years.
Wow. And then where did your first opportunity come?
So about a year into the internship, the Lakers had told me that they liked me, liked my work ethic, liked my desire and passion. But again, small, limited number of employees. So they're not going to create a position for you. So about a year in, I knew I was on their list of interested candidates if something came up. And so about after the second year of doing my internship, the person who was the Lakers assistant PR director at that time decided he wanted to do something different. Actually, a young lady named Stacy Brown, and she moved on. And I remember the day they told me. I was like on cloud nine. A guy named John Black was the Lakers PR director at that point in time, and he called and said, "You know what? This is your opportunity. Stacy's moving on. We want to hire you." So then it went from an internship for about a 2-year period, a little over a 2-year period, to becoming the assistant PR director for the Lakers.
It was a 6-year run, 7-year run with the Lakers. What was that like?
Yeah, so the run as a full-time employee as the assistant PR director was 6 years. Great for me. Again, keep in mind, I grew up the biggest Laker geek in the world. Like, to actually have a chance to work at the Forum and be around some of the greatness that had been there. At that point in time when I was there, my first year as an intern, going back to the internship, was Magic's HIV year. So I got to work with him for a little bit, but then he ended up coming back once I became full-time assistant PR director. So to work with a legendary team, and I got to work with Chick Hearn, the Lakers' legendary broadcaster, a guy I grew up idolizing. I literally sat next to him every game for 6 years at the Forum, got to travel with the team on the road a little bit and sit next to him on an airplane. It's like, here's this young kid from San Bernardino who grew up this huge Laker fan. Now he's traveling around the country and on a chartered airline with the Lakers. It's like, it's almost out of a fantasy tale story. But no, that was you didn't care what you were being paid at that point. No, not really. That was just a great opportunity to get my foot in the door, probably working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and do anything I could to help the Lakers PR staff at that time.
And so those travel opportunities, is that what led to meeting the right people and potentially finding that Golden State job?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just telling somebody else in another phone call that when I was the Lakers assistant PR director, I didn't know New York and Chicago were in the NBA. My boss always sent me to Salt Lake City and Sacramento and some of these other cities that he didn't want to go to. So one of the cities I went to a lot was Sacramento. And so after being with the Lakers for 6 years, a guy named Travis Stanley was with the Sacramento Kings, was called over to the Warriors by Gary St. Jean to be their vice president of PR. And so Travis called me and asked me to leave the Lakers and become the PR director for the Warriors. It was a really tough decision. Again, grew up a huge Laker fan for all these years. And even though I wasn't making a lot of money, to leave the Lakers and go to another organization was not an easy decision. Travis and I, to this day, joke around back and forth that it took me like a month to make up my mind to leave the Lakers to go to the Warriors. Even though the money was so much better, it was just the fact of leaving the Lakers was a tough decision for him.
Well, you had Kobe Bryant, right, at that time. Probably Shaq was there.
Yeah.
You knew there were probably championships around the corner, and now you're headed to Siberia.
I mean, you paint a very good picture there. My last 2 years in LA were Shaq and Kobe's first 2 years there. And as my old boss, John Black, reminds me all the time, when I left, they then made 3 straight trips to the finals. So timing is everything. And then, but everything comes full circle. Like you might get into this, but I've had the opportunity since then to be part of one of the greatest runs in the history of professional sports. So if you're in this business long enough, you'll probably see both sides of the equation.
You get to Golden State. I mean, people don't even, regular people probably don't even know who the hell Golden State is. They couldn't name 2 players on the team. You now went from Showtime to No Time, right? Like, I mean, what was that experience like? And it's interesting because the way you handle your job, I would say, I was working with you at that time, you working for a team that nobody cared about, the effort and the determination is no different than when you're working with the Warriors, who are the Beatles.
Correct. I would say we weren't No Time. We actually had 1 nationally televised game here my first year. So people in Kansas or Philadelphia did actually know who we were because we were on national TV once that year. But no, it was just that whole process of coming up was pretty unbelievable because my first 12 years here from 1998 to 2007, actually not first 2 years, not my first 9 years, we didn't do anything, didn't make the playoffs. At one point, the run was to 13 consecutive years without making a playoffs. And you almost have to try not to make the playoffs for 13 years in a row. But my guy, like you just said, I love that. It was a great challenge for me. It's like, I tell PR folks all the time, if you work for a team, you want to have a chance to work for a really good team and a really bad team. To work for a team like I did early on there, it really challenged me to think outside the box. How can I get the USA Today or the New York Times or the San Francisco Chronicle or ESPN to do a story on a product that's not very good? But at the end of the day, everybody has a story. Everybody has some good players. It really challenges you as a PR person to think outside the box and get some of these organizations to pay attention to you. One of my cool things from early on, I think it was 2001, again, probably coming off a 17 or 19 win season, we had a really good draft. We drafted 3 guys, Jason Richardson, Troy Murphy, and Gilbert Arenas in the same draft, a really good draft. But again, we were not a very good team, and I was able to convince the USA Today to do a diary on our 3 rookies that year, which meant USA Today still is a really good publication. It was probably even bigger back then. But every month during that regular season, November, December, January, February, March, and April, they did a front page sports story on catching up with the Warrior rookies on those 3 guys. So, that was an interesting thing for me, and really helped me become a really good pitch man. Like, how do you sell something that people really are not interested in? But there's always those angles to convince someone to talk about whether it's a team or a product or whatever it might be. And so that really challenged me as a PR guy to think outside the box and really become a good PR person.
I was producing a Sunday night sports show there in San Francisco called Game Day. And I remember I'd call you during the week and I'd say, hey man, can we get Antoine Jameson or can we get PJ Carlesimo? And you'd say, hey man, I could get you those guys, but everybody's heard that story. But let me tell you about Michael Petras. Let me tell you about Andris Biedrins. Let me tell you about these guys that nobody cares about, right? And somehow by the end of that call, I'm going, well, that is a great story. Like, let's have this guy on. And so how important during those lean years and those times, how important is, and for people that are looking at this and they're in PR, storytelling? How important is that?
I love it. I think that's one of the most fun aspects of my job. And again, might have said earlier, everybody has a story. One thing we do every season before the year starts, we sit down with our players and go through like a questionnaire with them with things that are interesting. What was their first job? What was their first car? Who's their closest high school teammate? Who's any other teammates they were with in high school? They're in the NBA. Try to learn as much as we can about those guys, so then we can take some of those answers and parlay those into stories for whether it be Channel 5 in San Francisco or the USA Today or the New York Times, because everybody has a good story. So the more you know about your players, the more you can pitch to the media and get an opportunity for somebody to tell their story. So I would encourage anybody in this field, whether it's working for a basketball team or some company with a product, just know your product and your organization's history inside and out. And in my situation, it's more so the players and the people that I work with, so they can tell their stories, because they're the ones that people want to hear about. And again, everybody has a unique story. You just need to have the ability to find out what those stories are and then sell those to your constituents, which in our case is the media.
You know, as a producer, you deal with a lot of PR guys, every team, right? And I would say 99% of teams, when they're on top and when things are going great, good luck getting through, good luck getting a call back, good luck getting somebody on your show, especially if you're local. The national guys, they never have a problem, right? But the local guys, when times are lean, they lean on you. When times are not lean, they could care less. And I think that's an interesting, it's got to be part of your philosophy, because one of the things I noticed working with you is that you never treated anybody different. Whether it was the local guy from the local paper or some blogger, or it was, you know, national. Granted, national probably got a little better attention, but everybody got what they needed, and everybody got it with a smile and respect and politeness. I'm wondering, where did you pick that up? And obviously it served you well.
Yeah, no, I just think that that's a huge key. You treat everybody the same, whether if you're working for a team that won 17 games or a team that won 73 games. And I've been in both of those situations. And I just think it's critical to never turn your back on someone who's been good to you during the lean years, when you then turn around and become a really good franchise. Now, you know, one thing we always try to do, we only have so many assets to, Steph Curry can only do so many interviews or whatnot. He can't do everything. But one thing I always challenge my team with is, like, say if you were still at San Francisco CBS 5, like, you may call for Steph Curry. Well, I might not be able to get you Steph, but maybe I can still help you. Maybe you can't get Steph, but again, I can get you player B, like you said earlier, or player C, just to make sure we still get some good bang for our buck out of it. You get something for your show. There's always great opportunities with your roster, but just learning how to treat the media the same. You know, I would like to think that my demeanor has not changed at all. Like I said, from when we were a really good team to when we were a really bad team, and treating everybody fairly and equally during all those times. I think that is really, really critical, to never change your attitude.
So now, despite the fact that maybe the Warriors aren't so good this year, they've had a lot of injuries. You just went through championships, great years, right? You have one down year. Next year, you get Steph Curry back, you get Clay back, you get Draymond. You guys are set to have another big run. What's it been like? I know one time when you were here in Orlando and we were talking, you said, this is insane. Like, do you see this? That it's like the traveling with the Beatles, and in every city, it's insanity. What has the last few years been like for you?
It's been crazy. It's the Beatles will be a good I was with the Lakers for, like I said, many years ago with Kobe and Shaq, and I thought that was a pretty interesting traveling circus. But now there's so many more media outlets now than there were 20 years ago or 22 years ago. So it's been it's been a little overwhelming in certain situations. But again, I don't look at it as being overwhelming. I look at it as a challenge. Like I just said, how can we still help all our constituents? How can we still help the people that were there when we were not very good and still do what we need to do? And I'm really blessed in my situation. I'll be really honest with you, Mike. You look at the people at the top of our organization, from Rick Welts to Bob Myers to Steve Kerr to Steph Curry, our best player. These guys are all what I would term as media friendly and media accessible. There are not a lot of folks in our business that enjoy doing media, especially when the spotlight is on you. And we get a great deal of cooperation from our people. I always say all the time, we're only as good as the people we work with. I can pitch you a good idea on Steph Curry or Draymond Green or Klay Thompson or Steve Kerr or Rick Welts. If one of those 5 people don't help me out and do that interview, that I'm beating my head against the wall.
And you're doing formal media training with these guys too, right?
Yeah, so we do, every team is required to do a seminar once a year. We actually have an external person come in. Ours is really cool. A guy named Kevin Sullivan used to be the PR man for the Dallas Mavericks for many years. He left the Mavericks, did some other PR, then he ended up at the White House as the director of communications under George W. Bush. And so he comes in and, when you tell your guys, hey, we got someone, the communications manager from the White House coming in, they seem to perk up a little bit, which is great. You got to have someone come in who has some respect. And so he comes in once a year and talks to our players. And I try to, and my entire staff, on any given day, talk to a player about media relations or show them an example of a TV interview they might have done or a newspaper story where they might have been quoted wrong, or even positive reinforcement, show them all the good stuff they've done and continue to harp on, hey, that was really good. You answered that question really well. Just continue to have dialogue with them about the right way to do interviews and how to interact with the media.
Everyone just saw The Last Dance, one of the most amazing runs. I think certainly this run with the Warriors has been one of the most amazing runs. What's that been like?
It's been incredible. I mean, the amount of work has not stopped. It never slows down. So the personal life has to take kind of a little bit of a back seat, but it's been incredible. Like, again, there's been one other team in the history of the NBA, the Boston Celtics, made the finals 5 years in a row back in the late 50s and early 60s. So we're the second team in the history of our league to ever make it 5 years in a row. It just doesn't happen. There might not be another team ever that makes the finals 5 years in a row. There probably won't. So to be part of that has been really, really cool. I would say probably the first year that we won it in 2015 was the most special year. And I think to me, the most special memory of that 1 year, if we were to break it down, would be the parade we had through downtown Oakland. I mean, our fans, Mike, you were here, when we were winning 17 and 19 games, we were still getting 17 and 18,000 fans in our building every night. We have some of the greatest fans in the world. So to get on a double-deck bus with your players and go through the streets of downtown Oakland for 5 or 6 or 7 miles and see hundreds of thousands of people along the parade route, out hanging out of buildings, hanging off of tree branches, and to be able to experience that for an organization. Again, when I got here, was as you noted earlier, winning 17 games, winning 19 games, couldn't get anybody really to pay attention to us. To be able to share that euphoria with your fans and your community, I say it all the time. Every person who works in professional sports should have the opportunity to experience a championship parade. It's one of the coolest things you'll ever be able to do. And I've been lucky enough to do 3 of those in the last 5 years.
That's awesome. One last thing to wrap it up. If you were given advice, and thinking back to yourself at, what was it, CSUSB, and spending 2.5 years looking for that internship, and now kids coming out of school are dealing with COVID and unemployment, and it's a hard time to get a job. If they had a dream to, whether it's a sports PR person or a agency or whatever it is, what would be your advice for them in a challenging time to go out there and make their dream come true?
Well, I would say any time is probably challenging, especially whether it's COVID-19 going on or just, again, to get into sports, just due to the limited field, the small number of jobs they are, is like, don't take no for an answer. You are just as good as the next person, but you've got to stand out. Like, again, when I went for that Laker internship, I was probably towed the line on being over too aggressive, but kind of hitting that happy medium. But don't take no for an answer. Think outside the box. Again, when I got my internship with the Lakers, I was sending plants and having professors from school talk to the PR director and traveling on road trips. I went to Seattle for a game, went to Las Vegas for a preseason game, went to Portland for a game, Phoenix, just to put my face in front of their PR director. Think outside the box. If you really want something bad enough, go after it. And when you do it, when you do get an internship, again, when I was with the Lakers, we had like 5 interns, like, work harder than the next guy. Make sure you're the first one in the office. Make sure you're the last one to leave. Make sure you're the one always in asking your boss, what can I do? What's the next thing I can do to be aggressive, to help you as my boss? How can I make our department even better? Be aggressive and be willing to do things. And again, at the end of the day, pay your dues. I put my personal life on hold for a 2, 3, 4 year period while I was trying to get the internship. And then when I finally got the internship, just realizing if I'm able to achieve this ultimate dream, the rest of my life is going to be terrific. And so I was able to kind of have some sacrifices early on while I was trying to get my career started. But just think outside the box. Don't take no for an answer, and try to outdo the next guy as you're trying to get to that position you're trying to get to.
I think that's all great advice. I'm going to steal one of your lines, but I truly mean it here. One of the all-time greats, if not the all-time great, Raymond Ridder. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate everything you do for sports and us in general.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.